This senior girl's name is Miso. One day, a classmate stopped her and asked to borrow a tampon. Miso remembered that she hadn't had her period for 2 months, so she immediately returned to class. She took out her notepad from her desk to check when she had her last period. Sure enough, she realized that her last period was 2 months ago. Miso's heart thumped in her chest. Then she hid in the toilet and closed the door behind her. She immediately lifted her clothes and touched her stomach, which was obviously bigger than before. She suddenly remembered the night 2 months ago. Sick Pin, her childhood friend, came to her to talk about her stress in school. Miso already had a crush on Sick Pin. It was on that night that the two of them tasted the forbidden fruit. Thinking about it, Miso panicked instantly. Then she realized that lately, she's been having a hard time with her energy, but her appetite has been increasing day by day. Miso suspected that she might be pregnant, but soon reassured herself that she would be fine. When she looked up the symptoms of pregnancy on the internet, she was shocked to realize that she fit all of them. Then her mother, Sunya, pushed the door from outside. She was so scared that she shut down her computer. Then she complained to her mother for not knocking. Her mother couldn't understand what was wrong with her daughter. She asked Miso if she was not feeling well, but Miso didn't dare to tell her mother the truth, so she lied that she was just under too much pressure from her studies. The mother was relieved to hear that and left. Miso wanted her stomach to get bigger because she ate too much, so she locked herself up in her room for the whole day and didn't eat anything. But her belly didn't go down, so she went to the drugstore and bought a pregnancy test. When she got home and took the test, looked at the red bar on it, Miso's heart finally dropped. However, just when she was about to throw the test away, she realized that there was a second red bar on the test. Miso was completely confused. She thought this pregnancy test must be defective, so she immediately went to another drugstore to buy another pregnancy test, but the result was still 2 bars. She was really pregnant. Miso felt a panic like never before. She asked Sick Pin out to the park to tell him about her pregnancy. She thought they were lovers after that night, but when Miso asked Sick Pin what he thought about their relationship, Sick Pin thought it was a waste of time to talk about relationships. They should focus on their studies. Sick Pin's words broke Miso's heart. She thought twice before telling him about her pregnancy. That night, Miso sat on her bed in silence. Then she took out a pregnancy test from her pocket. For her, she was about to take the college entrance exam. Being pregnant now would definitely ruin her future. After thinking it over, she decided to abort the baby secretly. So the next day after school, she went to the maternity hospital, but she looked at her school uniform and felt something was wrong. So she rushed home. She looked in her mother's closet and found a more mature looking dress. Then she sat down in front of the dressing table and took her mother's makeup and put on a mature look. When everything was ready, she left the house and went back to the maternity hospital. But the first time she faced this kind of thing, she was inevitably afraid. When the nurse called her name, she didn't dare to say yes, and finally got up and fled. After leaving the hospital, Miso sat helplessly on a park bench. At that moment, she suddenly felt the fetus move. This made Miso even more scared. She broke down and found Sick Pin, who was attending tuition classes, and told him about her pregnancy. Sick Pin was shocked and incredulous. He asked Miso if she was mistaken. After realizing that Miso was really pregnant, Sick Pin couldn't accept the fact. He claimed that he had to go to tuition class and asked Miso to go home first. In the face of Miso's cries, Sick Pin felt extremely irritated. He immediately scolded Miso to stop her nonsense. Then he left the place mercilessly. After Sick Pin left, he didn't go to cram school. He returned home in a state of despair. At that moment, he was very upset and regretted that he shouldn't have acted so rashly that night. He was a good student in the eyes of his teachers. His mother had poured all her hopes into him, so he couldn't let this kid stop him from having a bright future. The next day, Sick Pin took the initiative to ask Miso out and told her that he couldn't keep him. The college entrance exams were the most important thing, but Miso didn't agree with him. She asked Sick Pin if they didn't like each other. In the face of Miso's cries, Sick Pin told Miso to wait in the park tomorrow. They'll go to the hospital together to get rid of the baby. Then he turned around and left. Miso had no choice but to accept Sick Pin's arrangement. The next morning, Miso went to the maternity hospital with Sick Pin as her guide. To be on the safe side, Sick Pin decided to call first to see if he could be operated on, but he called several maternity hospitals and was told that abortion was illegal. Sick Pin had no choice but to take Miso to an internet cafe. Then he searched the internet for a private clinic that could perform abortions, and he found one. He immediately went out and called to ask how much it would cost. When he found out that the cost of the operation was $2 million, Sick Pin was in a bit of a dilemma, but he decided to take Miso there first. However, just as they arrived at the clinic's entrance, Miso accidentally saw a passing baby. The baby's cute face made Miso hesitate. Then she turned around and ran away. Sick Pin stopped Miso and asked her where she was going. When she found out that Miso had abandoned the baby because she couldn't bear to, Sick Pin frantically punched the pole. Miso was frightened by Sick Pin's madness. In the end, she chose to compromise. After both of them have calmed down, Sick Pin told Miso that he would find a way to pay for the operation, but it's impossible for a high school student to come up with $2 million in a short period of time. Sick Pin had no choice but to sneak into his mother's room. Just when he was about to take money from his mother's wallet, his mother, Hui Xiong, came in from outside and saw it. She never thought her son would steal money. She then asked Sick Pin why he did it. Under her repeated questioning, Sick Pin had to tell her about Miso's pregnancy. When Hui Xiong found out, she sat down on the floor. She couldn't believe that her son would make such a mistake. Miso must have seduced his son. So she went to Sick Pin's room and asked who knew about it. She was relieved to learn that only she, her son and Miso knew. Then she told Sick Pin not to be afraid. She told him not to see Miso again and that she would help him deal with the matter. The cowardly Sick Pin nodded his head in agreement. That night, Hui Xiong asked Miso out. She asked Miso again if she was really pregnant. Miso nodded with tears in her eyes. Hui Xiong slapped Miso angrily. She warned her not to tell anyone about this and not to meet Sick Pin again. Otherwise, she would never let her go. Miso could only nod her head in resignation. At that moment, Sick Pin was locked up in his room. He refused to answer Miso's calls. In the evening, Hui Xiong asked him to go abroad to study to avoid the storm. Sick Pin agreed, but the next day Hui Xiong was still worried that Miso would give birth to the baby. So she found Miso again and took her to the maternity hospital to abort the baby. The doctor didn't want to do the operation, but after Hui Xiang's hard pleading, the doctor agreed to operate on Miso. So Miso went to the operating table with fear and trepidation. But just when the operation was about to start, Miso jumped off the operating table and fled from the place. Miso regretted it. She decided to give birth to the baby no matter what. She felt the baby's heartbeat just now, but she forgot that she was only a 19-year-old high school student. She can't afford to raise the baby, but she couldn't think about that. She just wants to run away from the hospital. Hui Xiong saw her run out and chased after her, trying to take her back, but then Miso stumbled and fell to the ground. Hui Xiong immediately stepped forward and grabbed her. Then she dragged Miso back to the hospital. When Miso refused to do so, Hui Xiong fell on her knees and begged Miso. But even so, Miso still insisted on having the baby. Hui Xiong got angry and beat Miso. Then he warned Miso not to tell anyone that she is pregnant with Sick Pin's child. Otherwise, he would never let her go. Miso could only agree for the sake of her baby, but Hui Xiong still felt uneasy, so she took a ticket to fly abroad tomorrow and gave it to Sick Pin, and told Sick Pin that she had already arranged everything. When Miso went to school the next day, she learned from her classmates that Sick Pin was leaving the country today. Miso was in disbelief that Sick Pin was so irresponsible. Just then Sick Pin called Miso. He wanted to say something but didn't know how to. In the end, he just left a message to take care of himself and hung up. Miso still had a lot to say to Sick Pin. She couldn't let Sick Pin leave like that, so she ignored the risk of miscarriage. She desperately ran in the direction of the airport. By now, Sick Pin has already completed the formalities and is ready to board the plane. Hui Xiong followed his son closely and hugged him after giving him a few words of advice. Soon Miso arrived at the airport. She was anxiously looking for Sick Pin. Hui Xiong saw this scene. She hurriedly urged Sick Pin to get on the plane. She was afraid that Miso would catch up with Sick Pin and prevent him from leaving. Sick Pin was confused, but he turned around and walked towards the gate, and Hui Xiong ran towards Miso. She directly blocked Miso's way. Only then did Miso finally see Sick Pin. She shouted Sick Pin's name at the top of her voice, but Hui Xiong covered her mouth. In the end, she could only watch Sick Pin disappearing from her sight. Hui Xiong forced Miso into a corner and asked her what she wanted. When she heard that Hui Xiong wanted to take her to the hospital to abort the baby, Miso fled the place in a panic. She went back to school in a state of panic. When the homeroom teacher saw her, she asked her where she had been during school hours. When Miso didn't answer, the teacher was angry and punished her by making her run 10 laps around the playground. But Miso, who was pregnant, soon fainted. The teacher rushed Miso to the hospital, but to her surprise, the doctor told her that Miso was pregnant. The teacher was stunned. She touched Miso's stomach in disbelief. Then she saw the bandage that Miso had wrapped around her belly to hide it. That's how Miso's secret was discovered. It turned out that she had used bandages to cover her belly in order to hide her pregnancy, but she knew she couldn't go on like this. After all, the baby would be born one day. So after much deliberation, Miso finally found the courage to approach her mother to tell her the truth. But as she looked at her mother's back, she couldn't say anything. She had no choice but to go back to her room and write a letter to her mother. But she couldn't even begin to write. Miso broke down and crumpled the paper into a ball. The grievances she had suppressed for so many days made her cry out in pain. That night, her mother, Sunya, had a dream about a tree full of peppers, and this is the symbol of the birth dream. When Sunya woke up, she thought it was ridiculous. Her husband had died more than 20 years ago. She was afraid that her only daughter would be wronged, so she never remarried. She's definitely not pregnant. Her daughter was only in high school, so it was even more unlikely that she'd get pregnant. But the next day, when she was cleaning her daughter's room, she found Miso's bandage on her desk. While she was puzzled, her friend Hui Xiong came to visit. Sunya was puzzled and asked Hui Xiong why she was free today. She then asked her why she suddenly sent Sick Pin out of the country. Hui Xiong was shocked at her words. She didn't dare to tell Miso's mother the truth. She quickly gave an excuse that her husband's brother valued Sick Pin so much that he had to send him to study abroad. Miso's mother didn't suspect anything. She even praised Sick Pin for being so lucky. Hui Xiong was distracted and kept checking the time on his cell phone. Then the phone rang at Miso's Miso's house. The caller claimed to be a nurse from the maternity hospital. She told her that Miso was scheduled to have an abortion today, but she didn't show up. If she didn't show up, she wouldn't be able to have the abortion. Miso's mother was incredulous. Then she angrily asked what she was talking about, but the other party just hung up the phone. Hui Xiong asked her what was wrong. Miso's mother quickly explained that she was fine, but her panicked look betrayed her feelings. Hui Xiong realized that she must know about Miso's pregnancy. Then he left Miso's house satisfied. It turns out that after Hui Xiong sent Sick Pin out of the country yesterday, Hui Xiong thought that if Miso really gave birth to the baby, it would lead to a big trouble. So in order to get Miso to abort the baby, Hui Xiong paid a nurse to call Miso's home in an hour to tell Sun Ya about her daughter's pregnancy. She pretended to be a guest at Sun Ya's house to make sure Sun Ya answered the phone, because she thought that Sun Ya's character would never let her daughter have the baby. At that moment, Sun Ya became upset because of that phone call. Her mind couldn't help but recall last night's birth dream and the bandages she found in her daughter's room. This makes Sun Ya feel more and more uneasy, so she immediately rushed to Miso's room to check out the bandage. She wondered if the bandage was meant to cover her belly, but she soon dismissed the idea. She thought her daughter would never do such a ridiculous thing. That phone call must have been a prank. But then her cell phone rang. The caller was Miso's homeroom teacher. She asked Sun Ya to meet her at a cafe. Sun Ya thought it was her daughter's study problem, but the homeroom teacher interrupted her. Then she told her about Miso's pregnancy. Sun Ya was dumbfounded and couldn't believe it, even when the homeroom teacher told her that she had taken Miso to the hospital to confirm the pregnancy. Sun Ya insisted that the homeroom teacher had made a mistake. Then she stumbled out of the room. The homeroom teacher followed her. On the way back, Sun Ya couldn't help but think back to her daughter's recent unusual behavior. In her heart, she was already convinced. At that moment, Miso came back from school. Sun Ya immediately rushed to her daughter to touch her belly, but she immediately realized something was wrong. She couldn't believe her daughter would do such a thing. She was so angry that she fainted. Miso panicked when she saw her mom fainting. She and her class teacher rushed to help her mother into the house. When she woke up and saw Miso, her mother broke down again. She went crazy and told Miso to get out of the house. The homeroom teacher was helpless, so when she came out of Miso's house, she told Miso to ask her if she needed anything, and Sun Ya locked herself up in her room, full of sadness. Then she seemed to think of something. She immediately got up and rushed to her daughter's room. She asked Miso who the father of her child was. When her daughter refused to talk, she directly dragged Miso out of the room to find that scum of the earth. But Miso had already promised Hui Xiong that she wouldn't tell anyone about this, so she could only cry and tell her mother that she didn't know. Sun Ya thought her daughter had been bullied. She asked her daughter if she saw the man's face. "I'll take her to the police to arrest him now." However, Miso's answer was still, "I don't know." Sun Ya was furious and trembling, but she felt very sorry for her daughter. So the next morning Sun Ya came to Miso's room and told her not to go to school today. She took her to the hospital to abort the baby, but Miso was strongly against it. She said she wanted to give birth to the baby. When Sun Ya heard this, she was furious and accused Miso of being crazy. There are still 2 months to go before her college entrance exams. Why would she give birth to a child whose father she doesn't even know? Sun Ya was so angry that she turned around and rushed out of the house without even putting on her shoes, heading towards the busy road. It was then that Miso became completely panic-stricken. She hugged her mother and said she knew she was wrong. Sun Ya took Miso to the maternity hospital, but the doctor told her that the baby was already 4 months old. It's very risky to operate now. They refused to operate on Miso. After hearing this, Sun Ya went to another maternity hospital, but the answer was the same. No matter how much Sun Ya prayed, the doctor did nothing. Sun Ya was completely desperate. She took Miso to a river in a daze. Then she told Miso that this was where she swore she'd raise her properly, but she didn't. She was responsible for what happened to her daughter, so she didn't have the confidence to live anymore. Then she dragged Miso to jump into the river with her. Miso begged her mother not to do that. The baby in her belly wanted to live. These words instantly softened Sun Ya's heart. In the end, she chose to accept the baby. At this moment, it doesn't matter who the father of this child is. It was the child of her beloved daughter. The next day Sun Ya went to her daughter's homeroom teacher. She told her about Miso's inability to have an operation. She hoped that the homeroom teacher would help Miso hide the secret, so that Miso could take the college entrance exam. The homeroom teacher immediately said she could help keep the secret, but in a month or two, Miso's growing belly will be exposed sooner or later. Sun Ya told the teacher not to worry. She would never let anyone see it. But that day, when Miso was hiding in the bathroom, covering her belly with a bandage, she carelessly forgot to lock the door. Her friend barged right in and saw it. Her friend's eyes widened in shock. Miso's secret was finally discovered. The friend reacted and fled the place in a hurry. In order to keep the story from spreading, Miso had to drag her friend to a deserted place. She admitted to her that she was pregnant. She begged her friend to help her keep her secret. She thought her friend would help her, but after hearing this, her friend deliberately avoided the topic, and that's why Miso was so upset the whole day. So after school, Miso went to her friend again and bought her a bunch of her favorite food to please her, but her friend acted like she was above her. She thought that people like Miso didn't deserve to be her friend anymore. Then she got up and left without a word. Miso cried without tears. knowing that her secret would not be able to be kept at school. She returned home with a heavy heart. Sun Ya came in and asked her what had happened. Miso quickly lied that she was just a little tired. Sun Ya didn't suspect a thing. She told her that her school uniform was too tight, so she bought her some loose uniforms. Her mother's concern makes Miso feel bad. Sun Ya, seeing her daughter's depressed look, immediately comforted her with her heartfelt words. Miso felt even more guilty after hearing this. She went up to her mother and hugged her. The next day at school, her friends blabbed about her pregnancy. Miso hid in the bathroom and listened to her classmates' vicious comments. Miso was thrown into the spotlight. All her classmates turned their backs on her. It was as if she was some kind of filth. Miso was on pins and needles, but remembering her mother's words of encouragement, she picked up her chopsticks and ate as if nothing had happened. But as soon as she finished eating, she threw up everything. Soon Miso's pregnancy reached the principal's ears. The principal immediately called Miso's homeroom teacher to his office. He ordered her to find out if it was true. If it was true, she had to take action as soon as possible. He would not allow this to spread outside the school and ruin the school's reputation. The homeroom teacher had to find Miso and ask her to take some time off from school before things got worse. But Miso insisted on finishing the entrance exams. The homeroom teacher had to call Miso's mom. She told her that Miso's pregnancy had spread throughout the school. She asked her to persuade Miso to take a break from school. When Sun Ya found out, she was worried that her daughter wouldn't be able to handle the pressure. But Miso told her that she felt better now that it's out in the open. Then she told her mother not to worry. She would continue to go to school. But what Miso didn't know is that her friend didn't just spread the word about her pregnancy all over the school. She also told her mother. So the story spread among the parents. They were worried that Miso would jeopardize their children's entrance into the university. So they joined forces to pressure the principal to expel Miso. The homeroom teacher tried to plead for Miso but was scolded by the principal. Sun Ya came to the office immediately after learning the news and begged the principal not to expel Miso. He even put down all his dignity and fell on his knees in front of the principal. At that moment, Miso was being bullied by her classmates and learned from her classmates that her mother was in the principal's office. She already expected that her mother would beg the principal in a lowly manner. Sure enough, when she rushed to the principal's office, her mother was kneeling in front of the principal. Miso's heart felt like a knife. Obviously all this is her fault, but now she had to make her mother take the blame for her. Seeing that her mother was still begging the principal, she went straight to the headmaster and pulled her mother up. Then she dragged her mother out of the principal's office. She could tolerate the discrimination of her classmates, but what she couldn't tolerate was her mother suffering for her. Just then Sun Ya saw the juice on Miso's body. She knew someone must have bullied her daughter. She asked Miso who did it. Instead of answering, Miso tells her mother that she doesn't want to go to this school anymore. But even though the mother and daughter's situation was tragic enough, there are still people who won't let them go. At that moment, Hui Xiang suddenly received a call from the Study Abroad Center, informing her that Sick Pin's study abroad documents had been completed. But when she arrived at the center, she was told that Sick Pin had to come back to get a student visa. Hui Xiang's smile immediately froze when he heard that. She was worried about what would happen if Sick Pin went back and met Miso again. Just when Hui Xiang was at a loss, she overheard from the students' parents that Miso had been expelled from the school. But she didn't think that was enough. She had to get Miso out of the city for good. So she called the education department. She reported Miso's mother for running an illegal piano school. Then she stood in front of Sun Ya's piano room. Soon the education department came, and things went just as Hui Xiang expected. The education department ordered Sun Ya to shut down her piano room on the grounds that it was undocumented. But the piano room was the only source of income for the family. Sun Ya begged to be allowed to continue teaching piano, but the other party just turned around and left. Sun Ya didn't know what to do, while Hui Xiang pretended to fight for Sun Ya. At this moment, Sun Ya immediately turned to her. She is the only one who knows that he doesn't have an ID. Hui Xiang quickly lied that she was chatting with other students' parents and blurted it out. Then she apologized to Sun Ya. Hui Xiang immediately suggested to Sun Ya to leave this place, find a place where no one knows them, and start a new life. But Sun Ya hesitated. After all, this is the place where she has lived for decades. She really doesn't want to leave. But what happened next broke Sun Ya completely. At night, when Sun Ya returned home, she found out that her brother had stolen all her savings and run away. At that moment, Sun Ya was completely devastated. Soon she fell ill. After waking up, she decided to leave this sad place. The next day, Sun Ya called a moving company. Hui Xiang rushed over as soon as he got the news, because she could only see Sun Ya leaving with Miso with her own eyes. Perhaps out of guilt, Hui Xiang took out an envelope full of money and handed it to Sun Ya. Sun Ya was very touched, but she didn't know that everything that happened to her was caused by the woman in front of her. So Sun Ya took Miso away from home to start a new life. Soon after, Miso's baby was born in the hospital's maternity ward, but Sick Pin was living a life of luxury abroad. Luckily, her mother was always by Miso's side. With the sound of the baby's cries, Miso finally gave birth to a boy. Looking at her son's tender face, Miso cried tears of joy. At that moment, she felt that all the pain she had suffered was worth it. Soon 7 years passed. Miso's son grew up healthy with her, but when Miso was picking up her son from school with his mother, Miso's son jumped into his mother's arms and called out to Sun Ya for his mom. It turned out that Sun Ya was worried about her daughter's reputation, so she lied that she was the child's mother. That's why Miso has been referring to her son as her brother and sister all these years. What Miso didn't know was that today was also the day Sick Pin returned home. By now, Sick Pin had already forgotten all about her. Not only did he get his his master's degree abroad. He also married a rich girl. His mother and sister came to the airport to meet him. Hui Xiang was overjoyed to see her son, whom she hadn't seen for a long time. She is always snobbish and very happy with her daughter-in-law, who is from a good family. But on the way back, Hui Xiang saw the Miso family. It made her break out in a cold sweat, but she couldn't see them clearly because of the distance. And 7 years ago, she had planned for Miso and her daughter to move out of the city, so she thought she was mistaken. Unbeknownst to her, Miso had moved from the countryside last month. Then Sik Pin returned home with his new wife. She was very satisfied with the beautiful wedding house, but she didn't know that everything here had nothing to do with Sik Pin. Sik Pin's family is just staying at his uncle's mother-in-law's house. But Hui Xiang was not only ungrateful. Instead, he wanted to take it all away, because in Hui Xiang's opinion, Uncle Zhen Gau's wife had already passed away. He has no children. His son should inherit the property. Therefore, Hui Xiang started to make every effort to please the chairman. Soon he got his son a position as the head of the planning department of the chairman's company. While Hui Xiang was very satisfied with his present life, Miso was working part-time to give her son a better life. She also had to find time to prepare for the journalist exam. She often got nosebleeds from overwork, but she never regretted giving birth to her son. Every time she came home at night, she would see her son and her tiredness would be wiped away. That morning, when Miso went to deliver milk at her part-time job, Miso saw a man stealing the milk she had just put down. Thinking about how the milk she delivered always disappeared lately, she immediately recognized the man as a milk thief. So she grabbed a broom and rushed to the man and beat him up. She called him a shameless thief. The man hurriedly explained that he was not a thief, but Miso didn't believe him. He had no choice but to call the police. Soon after, the police pulled out the surveillance camera. Miso realized that she had misunderstood him. The real thief was someone else. The man just chased the thief away and put the milk back where it belonged. At that moment, Miso also realized that she had misunderstood him. After they came out of the police station, Miso apologized to the man for her rashness, but it wasn't as simple as she thought, because she broke the man's $900,000 tablet. The man demanded Miso to pay for the damage, but she didn't have that kind of money. Miso had no choice but to leave her phone number and pledge her ID to the man, begging him to give her a few days. The man didn't give her a hard time. He told Miso he'd call her in a few days and to remember to answer. Then he turned around and left, and Miso went to the bank to check the balance on her card. When she saw that there was only $80,000, she was very upset. Then she had to find another job as a dishwasher in order to pay back the money. But even then, it was impossible to come up with $900,000 in just a few days. Just when Miso was wondering where to find another part-time job, Miso overheard a friend of the restaurant's owner complaining about the upcoming opening of his fried chicken restaurant, but the people who wanted to work there didn't show up for no reason. So he asked the owner if there were any girls who wanted to work. When Miso heard that there was money to be made, she ran up to the owner and asked him how much he paid per hour. When she heard $50,000 an hour, she agreed without thinking, but what she didn't expect was that she would be asked to dance in front of the door in a short skirt. Although she was reluctant, she had to do it in order to pay back the man's money. This scene was just seen by Sik Pin, who had just finished drinking with his friends. Sik Pin was shocked. Some of his classmates also recognized Miso. They couldn't help but tease Miso that she had excelled in school, but 2 months before the entrance exam, she was found to be pregnant and expelled from school. I didn't realize that she is now in such a bad shape. Sik Pin instantly fled in a state of weakness. Miso's appearance made Sik Pin feel uneasy. After much deliberation, he decided to meet Miso, but when he returned, Miso had already left work. When he got home, he hugged his sleeping wife, but all he could think of was the image of Miso dancing in front of the nightclub. Sik Pin felt guilty, so the next night, after work, Sik Pin went to the club again, but when he got out of the car, there was no sign of Miso. Just when he thought he had missed her again, when he turned around, he saw Miso, who had just gotten off work. He was so excited that he chased after her, but in the end, he couldn't catch up with Miso. The two of them passed each other once again, so Sik Pin went back to the club and tried to get Miso's number from the owner, but the owner told him that Miso was a temporary part-time worker and didn't have a phone number, and that today was Miso's last day of work. Sik Pin was disappointed and left the club. Miso didn't know that Sik Pin was looking for her. She was in the library trying to prepare for her journalism exam. At that moment, a friend called and told her that a company was looking for part-time workers with very good salaries and asked Miso if she wanted to go for an interview. Of course Miso wouldn't say no, but if she wanted to go to the interview, she needed an ID card, but she left it with a man a few days ago. The man's name is Xiaolong. Miso had to ask him to return her ID first. Xiaolong also gave it to her quickly. Miso gave Xiaolong her bankbook and left in a hurry. Xiaolong was curious and opened the bankbook to see how much money was in it. When he saw that there was only $70,000, and never deposited more than $500,000 in the past, when the whole person was shocked. He never thought that there were such poor people in the world. At this time, Miso had already arrived at the company to wait for the interview. She was extremely nervous, because this company is only hiring 4 part-timers, but there were more than 100 applicants. When she entered the room for the interview, the interviewer was Xiaolong. Xiaolong. Miso stared in disbelief, and Xiaolong looked up and saw Miso. She was so scared that she hurriedly avoided looking at him. During the interview, the interviewer was asked to try the company's beef soup and write her own thoughts on it. Everyone else just tasted it. Only Miso drank all the beef soup. Xiaolong and the other interviewer were shocked. After the interview, Miso came out of the office sulking. She thought she had no chance, but then Xiaolong chased her out. He returned the bankbook to Miso. Miso wanted to give him her ID, but Xiaolong refused. He told her to just send the money on time. Miso was very grateful and promised not to renege on her debt. Xiaolong then turned around and left. Miso was even more convinced that she wouldn't be accepted. She was so frustrated that she didn't notice Sick Pin passing by behind her. That day, Hui Xiang was shopping at the supermarket. A boy with an ice cream suddenly stains her new dress. Hui Xiang angrily scolded the boy, but she didn't know that the boy in front of her was her own grandson, Yong Hoon. Scared by Hui Xiang's behavior, the boy cries and goes to his mother. Hui Xiang wanted to go after him, but when she saw that the person the boy was calling his mom was Sun Ya, her anger disappeared in an instant. Seeing that Sun Ya was about to look at her, Hui Xiang hurriedly ran away. Because Sun Ya's daughter's unmarried pregnancy was caused by her son, she ran out of the supermarket and went back to her car. She never thought that Sun Ya, whom she drove away 7 years ago, would come back, but soon Hui Xiang realized the truth. Because Sun Ya doesn't know she did all this, why should she panic? So Hui Xiang went back to the supermarket only to find that Sun Ya and the boy had already left. Hui Xiang was disappointed. She suspected that the boy was the child Miso refused to abort, but when she thought that the boy called Sun Ya's mom instead of his grandmother, she dismissed the idea. She didn't realize that Sun Ya was afraid that her daughter would be discriminated against. That's why she asked Yong Hoon to call her mom. That night, Hui Xiang had a dream about a boy and he called her grandmother. She woke up in a flash. She didn't understand why she had such a dream. It made her panic. In order to find out whose child the boy was, Hui Xiang went to the supermarket every day for the next few days, but there was no sign of them. She felt it was not a good idea to wait so long, but she didn't know when they would show up. Sun Ya left 7 years ago and cut off contact with everyone. She didn't know where to look. Just when she was at a loss, she suddenly remembered that since they came to this supermarket, their place of residence must not be too far away from here. So she went to a nearby kindergarten and asked the teacher if there was a child named Yong Hoon, but the teacher asked for the child's last name. Hui Xiang told the teacher she didn't know. The teacher told her that for the safety of the children, they couldn't disclose any information about the child. Hui Xiang had to leave without a trace, but she didn't give up. She went outside to the activity area and asked if they knew a child named Yong Hoon, but none of the children said they did. Then she went to another kindergarten. She asked a boy if he knew Yong Hoon, but as soon as the boy told her that no one was named Yong Hoon, a teacher went up to the boy and pulled him back, and asked her who she was. Hui Xiang had to leave in frustration. The whole day went by with no luck. Hui Xiang was disappointed, but then Sun Ya and Yong Hoon passed by behind her. When Hui Xiang got home, she was upset. Then she suddenly remembered that her friend had mentioned meeting Sun Ya, so she immediately called her friend and asked her where she saw Sun Ya. She found out that it was in Mapo-ku. The next day, she went to a kindergarten in the neighborhood, and to her surprise, she found him. Seeing Yong Hoon coming out of the slide, Hui Xiang recognized the boy right away. She immediately greeted Yong Hoon with excitement. The more she looked at Yong Hoon, the more she was shocked, because Yong Hoon looked so much like his son. But just when she wanted to take a closer look at Yong Hoon, the teacher realized what was going on, and asked her what she was doing. Hui Xiang lied that she was just passing by and left in a hurry, but she bumped into Sun Ya right after she came out of the kindergarten. They recognized each other instantly. Sun Ya was about to say something. Yong Hoon ran out of the kindergarten screaming for his mom. They came to the cafe to catch up after years of not seeing each other. Hui Xiang tentatively asked Sun Ya if Yong Hoon was Miso's child. Sun Ya immediately denied it. She was afraid that Hui Xiang would spread rumors if he knew the truth, so she said that she took Miso to the hospital to abort the baby after they left. Yong Hoon is her son by her second husband. Hui Xiang was relieved to hear that. After all, her son had just married a rich girl. If a son came out at this time, the consequences would be disastrous. Then they exchanged pleasantries. Sun Ya carries the sleeping Yong Hoon on her back and heads home. Hui Xiang confirmed that Yong Hoon was not her grandson. She was so happy. She even cooked a big meal to celebrate at home. However, the next day when Hui Xiang was cleaning her house, she accidentally saw a picture of her son when he was little. Her smile instantly froze, because Yong Hoon looked so much like her son when he was young. That day, Miso came to the office for her part-time job, but she met Sick Pin, and he was her boss. When they saw each other, they couldn't believe it. Miso turned around and ran away. Sick Pin rushed after her. He had so much to say to Miso, but he didn't know where to start. Then he saw Miso's temporary worker's license on her chest. He realized that Miso's life must be very difficult. When Miso thought of Sick Pin abandoning her and her baby for his own future, leaving her alone to suffer the discrimination of others, she was filled with hatred for Sick Pin, so she coldly asked Sick Pin not to follow her. Then she left the place. Sick Pin stood still for a long time, and Miso secretly hid in the stairwell, because Sick Pin's presence made her heart flutter again. Xiaolong passed by and saw this scene. Out of concern, he asked Miso if something was wrong. When Miso didn't answer, he was puzzled and knelt down to check. He realized that Miso's face was covered with tears. This caused Xiaolong to feel an inexplicable pain. Sick Pin has been distracted ever since he met Miso. Obviously, he was out shopping with his wife, but all he could think about was Miso. That's why he treats his wife so perfunctorily. This made his wife, Yoon Jang, very unhappy. She got angry and asked Sick Pin what was wrong. Of course, Sick Pin wouldn't tell his wife the truth. He immediately lied that he was too busy at work and was a bit upset. That's how he avoided Yoon Jang's questioning. At the same time, Miso, who was outside with Xiaolong doing market research for the company's new beef soup, also looked preoccupied. Just then, two high school students came over to taste the beef soup. Looking at their youthful appearance, Miso's sweet past with Sick Pin reappeared in his mind. Because she was too distracted by her thoughts, Miso burned her hand while pouring the beef soup. When Xiaolong saw this, he immediately panicked. Although Miso said he was fine, but he still anxiously ran to get some ice. He took some ice and gave Miso a cold compress. He expressed his concern for her in his words. At this moment, Miso couldn't help but cry. Sick Pin went back to the office and immediately called the personnel to find out Miso's address and phone number. At night, Sick Pin could not calm down. Back then, Miso was a model student in school. If he hadn't gotten Miso pregnant, Miso wouldn't have been expelled from school. She wouldn't be working part-time to make ends meet. Thinking about it, he felt so guilty and remorseful. So he thought about it for a long time and then summoned up the courage to call Miso. Miso froze when she heard Sick Pin's voice. She didn't understand how Sick Pin got her number. Sick Pin didn't explain, but told Miso that he was in front of her house and wanted to meet her. The two of them went to a nearby cafe. Sick Pin took out an envelope full of money and tried to make up for his debt to Miso. He said that if it wasn't enough, he could add more. He just wanted to be friends with Miso again. Miso thought it was ridiculous. Then she warned Sick Pin not to show up in front of her again. Sick Pin rushed after him. He insisted that Miso take the money, so she wouldn't have to work around the clock. But Miso told Sick Pin that she wouldn't take his money even if she became a beggar. Then Miso returned home in a state of despair. She thought that the money could not make up for all the pain and suffering she had endured over the years. Her pride wouldn't allow her to take the money. At that moment, tears fell from the corners of her eyes. At that moment, the sound of her son's crying came from inside the house. She hurriedly wiped away the tears on her face. She ran into the house and picked up her son and asked him what was wrong. She heard from the mother that her son had been clamoring for a video game. He said that all his classmates' dads had bought it for them. Why didn't he have a father? Her son's words made Miso's heart tighten. When she went to bed at night, her son once again asked for a father. Miso's guilt for her son reached its peak. At first she insisted on giving birth to her son despite Evrion's opposition. But now not only did she fail to give her son a complete family, she could only stay with her son as his older sister. Miso felt that she had wronged her son. At the same time, her heart was in a struggle. She doesn't know if she should let her son meet Sick Pin. That day, Hui Xiang came to the kindergarten and found Yong Hoon. She suspected that Yong Hoon was Miso's secret child, so she pulled out a piece of Yong Hoon's hair. Then she took Yong Hoon's hair and Sick Pin's toothbrush and rushed to the genetic testing center for a paternity test. The results came back soon after. Hui Xiang was very nervous. The doctor then told Hui Xiang that the test results showed genetic consistency. It's certain that they're father and son. Hui Xiang froze on the spot. She never thought that Miso would actually give birth to the child. Looking at the paternity report in her hand, it was as if a huge stone was pressing down on her heart, making her breathless. Hui Xiang returned to her car in a panic, not knowing what to do. If this incident was exposed, the consequences would be unimaginable. So she tore up the report and tried to hide it. But Yong Hoon was her grandson after all. She couldn't resist going to the kindergarten to see him secretly. At that moment, Yong Hoon saw other children playing video games, so he asked them if he could borrow it, but the kids didn't lend it to him. He told Yong Hoon to ask his father to buy it. Then he pushed Yong Hoon away. Yong Hoon cried that he didn't have a father. He said he'd lend it to him, but the kid pushed him down again. He even tried to hit Yong Hoon. Luckily, Hui Xiang showed up in time to chase them away. Looking at the crying Yong Hoon, Hui Xiang was heartbroken. He picked him up from the ground. At the same time, she blamed Miso for not providing a good life for her child. She then took Yong Hoon in her arms and promised to buy him a video game. The next day, Hui Xiang came to the kindergarten again with a new game console. As soon as she saw Yong Hoon come out, she couldn't stop her smile from rising. Then she carefully looked around and realized that Sun Ya and Miso hadn't come yet. So she rushed over to them. Yong Hoon recognized her and greeted her politely. Hui Xiang picked up Yong Hoon and carried him to a corner and took out a game console. Yong Hoon was very happy to see the game. He thanked Hui Xiang with gratitude. Hui Xiang is very happy to see his grandson is so cute and polite. At that moment, the teacher came out to look for Yong Hoon. Hui Xiang had no choice but to part with Yong Hoon. When Yong Hoon got home, he couldn't wait to show his mom the game. He claimed that the aunt he met at the kindergarten bought it for him. When Sun Ya hears that it's Hui Xiang, he calls her and asks her to meet him. Hui Xiang knew that Sun Ya was looking for him for the game console. So she went to the cafe where she met Sun Ya. She didn't expect Sun Ya to bring Yong-hun along. Hui Xiang stared at Yong-hun with a big smile, and Sun Ya told her bluntly, although he appreciated her buying Yong-hun a game console, but it's too expensive. It's very stressful for them to receive such a gift. So she asked Hui Xiang not to buy anything for Yong-hun anymore. Hui Xiang promised not to do it again, but in her heart, she's complaining about Sun Ya. At that time, Miso knew nothing about what happened. Since the last time she met Sick Pin, she started to run into Sick Pin frequently at the office. Looking at Sick Pin in the elevator, she subconsciously didn't want to go up, but Xiaolong didn't know about their relationship. He even helped Miso to stop the closing elevator door. Miso could only go in with her head. Faced with such an awkward situation, Miso had the idea of quitting, but she couldn't let go of such a high-paying job. This made her struggle immensely. The next day when she was at work, because she was distracted, she didn't notice the crate on top of her head. Luckily, Xiaolong realized it in time and rushed forward to hug her to avoid it. That day, Yun Zheng left her wedding ring on the sink while washing her hands. When she came out of the bathroom, she held the ring in her hand to admire it. She bumped into Miso. Miso rushed to apologize to Yun Zheng. She didn't know that Yun Zheng was Sick Pin's wife. Yun Zheng also didn't know about Miso's relationship with Sick Pin. When she realized that the ring was missing, she scolded Miso for her lack of foresight. She laughed at her for not being able to pay for it even if she worked all her life. Then she ordered Miso to find it for her. Sick Pin saw Miso with his wife in the corner. He subconsciously hid himself. He didn't want Miso to know he was married, because he still wants to get back together with Miso. Yun Zheng is also responsible for the missing ring, but she only told Miso to look for it. Even on the ground, Miso could only do as she was told. At that moment, Xiaolong came to look for Miso. Seeing her kneeling on the ground, Xiaolong rushed forward to ask what happened. After finding out what happened, Xiaolong immediately pulled Miso up from the ground in anger. He asked Yun Zheng why she was at fault for the collision. Why was she standing there without moving? And how could her ring fall to the ground so easily if she was wearing it normally? A series of questions left Yun Zheng speechless. Then Xiaolong took Miso's place and searched around the car. He finally found the diamond ring under the car. He gave the ring back to Yun Zheng. Then he told Yun Zheng to be more careful with the ring in the future. Yun Zheng knew he was in the wrong, so he took the ring back and left unhappily. Xiaolong blamed Miso for being bullied because it's not her fault, but he was touched by Miso's kindness, and Yun Zheng went back to the car and immediately vented his frustration. He didn't realize that Sick Pin's face was very ugly. On the way back, Yun Zheng realized that her ring was missing a small diamond, so she immediately told Sick Pin to turn the car around and go back. She was going to ask the woman for compensation. She yelled at Miso for not having any manners. Sick Pin was already angry with Yun Zheng's behavior. Then he pulled over and scolded his wife. Yun Zheng was never so angry. She got out of the car in a rage and hailed a cab and left. But Xiaolong, realizing that he liked Miso, started to pursue Miso. He waited for Miso to get off work and wanted to have dinner with her. Miso thought she should thank Xiaolong for what happened earlier, so she agreed. In the evening, they went to a street stall together. At this time, Xiaolong asked Miso if she had a boyfriend. When Miso answered no, he immediately laughed out loud. Miso was puzzled. She didn't understand why Xiaolong was so excited, but even if she did, she couldn't respond to Xiaolong's feelings. After all, she's a single mom who's unmarried and pregnant, but Xiaolong didn't know that. When he gets home, he's still reeling from the fact that Miso doesn't have a boyfriend, and Sick Pin stayed out all night knowing that his wife was angry. The image of Miso being harassed by Yo Jing kept popping into his mind. Sick Pin felt a strong sense of guilt, so he called Miso right away. When Miso saw it was him, she hung up, so Sick Pin waited for Miso to get off work and blocked her in front of the office. He forced Miso into his car. Sick Pin took Miso to a cafe, then he took out an envelope full of money from his pocket. He told Miso not to get angry and to listen to what he had to say. He said that 7 years ago he didn't really want to leave her before he left the country. At that time, he was still too young. He was sent abroad by his family. Over the years, he has never forgotten her. He really wants to help her. That's why he wants her to accept this money. After hearing this, Miso rejected Sick Pin. Then she was ready to leave. Sick Pin rushed after her and stopped Miso. Then he took Miso into his arms in pain. He promised that he would never make her sad again. But this scene was seen by Sick Pin's sister. She immediately recognized the woman her brother was holding as Miso. She immediately called her mother in a panic. The next day, in order to get back together with Miso, Sick Pin brought her to the snack bar he used to go to in high school. The owner recognized them right away. He asked if they were married. Sick Pin replied that they were just good friends. But the owner didn't believe her. This made Miso feel embarrassed. The owner sat them down and asked them what they wanted to eat. Sick Pin ordered a lot of Miso's favorite dishes. Miso didn't realize that Sick Pin still remembered them and was touched. Sick Pin handed Miso a piece of rice sausage covered in soup directly to his mouth. Miso froze and was touched by Sick Pin's tenderness. It was as if she had returned to the time when she and Sick Pin were in love. When she got home, Miso was still in a state of happiness. She decided to start over with Sick Pin. She has completely forgotten that Sick Pin left her behind. But Miso doesn't know that Sick Pin is now married, and that she was planning to let her son meet Sick Pin. So she asked her mother what she would do if Yong-hoon's real father showed up. To her surprise, her mother excitedly asked her what she meant by that. Miso quickly told her mother that she was just upset because Yong-hoon was always clamoring for his father. Mom thought Miso was bullied into getting pregnant with Yong-hoon. She blamed herself and regretted not taking care of her daughter. She said that even though she was still young, if she had gotten pregnant with Yong-hoon with someone she loved, she said that she would have done everything she could to help her. After that, she laid down and didn't want to talk about it anymore. Sik-pin was lying in bed with his wife. His thoughts were all about Miso. Then he simply got up and left the bedroom. Yoon-jae noticed but didn't say anything. Sik-pin went to the study to look at Miso's pictures on his cell phone. Miso also sent Sik-pin a text message asking him to meet her at the amusement park tomorrow. She was going to bring her son to meet Sik-pin. The next morning, Hui-xiang went to bring juice to her son, but she found her daughter-in-law alone in bed. She thought her son was in the bathroom, but when she asked, she realized they slept in separate beds last night. Hui-xiang felt uneasy, so she immediately went to the study to look for Sik-pin, but she found Sik-pin's cell phone on the desk. Hui-xiang suddenly recalled her daughter telling her that she saw Sik-pin and Miso hugging a few days ago. She suspected that her son was with Miso again. She decided to check her son's cell phone. Sure enough, she saw a text message from Miso asking Sik-pin to meet him today. Hui-xiang was shocked and got a piece of paper and wrote down Miso's phone number. Miso woke up early in the morning to prepare the meal for today's outing and dressed up her son. Yong-hoon simply thought that Miso was taking her to the playground, but just as Miso was getting ready to take her son out, Miso received a call from Hui-xiang asking her to meet him at a nearby cafe. Miso had a bad feeling but she went to the cafe anyway. She greeted Hui-xiang politely, but the other guy was acting like he was above her. As soon as she sat down, Hui-xiang took a glass of water and threw it in her face. Miso didn't understand what she had done wrong, so she angrily questioned Hui-xiang. What she got in return was Hui-xiang's insults about her seducing a married man. Sik-pin was already married. Miso was in a state of shock. She didn't realize that Sik-pin was married. Hui-xiang warned Miso that he would never let her go if she met Sik-pin again. Then she got up and left. Miso was devastated. At that moment, she felt like a joke, so she immediately went to Sik-pin and told him straight out that she had just met his mother. She asked him why he was bothering her if he was married. He made her look like a home wrecker for no reason at all. She told Sik-pin not to come to her anymore and turned around to leave, but Sik-pin grabbed her and said that even if he was married, he could still meet her. If she doesn't want to, he'll go back and get a divorce. Miso didn't expect Sik-pin to be so shameless, so she slapped him hard. Then Miso, in order not to disappoint her son, Miso silently hid all her sadness and took her son to the amusement park alone. Although she couldn't give her son a complete family, but she vowed to give him enough love. After sending her son home, Miso, worried that her mom would find out, said hello to her mom and went to the library. Xiaolong, who adored Miso, had been waiting in the library for a long time. He was so happy to see Miso. The preoccupied Miso didn't even notice Xiaolong. Xiaolong didn't care. He got up and went to the side to buy a drink. And Miso is still in the pain of Sik-pin's marriage. When Xiaolong came back with the drinks, he saw Miso running out of the library. He hurriedly packed his things and chased after her, but when he turned around, he found Miso in the rain. He rushed forward to grab Miso, but he didn't realize that Miso fainted. The next day, Hui-xiang found Sik-pin. He told him that he and Yoon-jae had been married for more than a year, and it was time for them to have a child. Seeing that his son had no intention to do so, Hui-xiang simply expressed his thoughts. She wanted Sik-pin to have a child with Yoon-jae and pass it on to his uncle Jin-go as an adopted son. That way, he would have a chance to get Jin-go's mother-in-law's huge fortune. Sik-pin agreed without hesitation after hearing his mother's words. After all, if his uncle remarried and had a child of his own, he wouldn't have a chance to get the property. Hui-xiang was very happy to get his son's consent, so when she got home, she immediately went to the chairman and acted like she cared about Jin-go. She said that Jin-go must be very lonely because his sister-in-law died so early, and Jin-go didn't have any children, so she wanted to pass the child to Jin-go after Yoon-jae and Sik-pin had a child. The chairman is tempted by the proposal, but feels that it's a bit selfish. Hui-xiang saw the chairman's concern. She immediately told him it would be fine. The family has relied on the chairman to take care of them all these years. They really want to repay this favor. The chairman was very grateful. That night, the president called her son-in-law, Sik-pin and Hui-xiang to her room. She asked Sik-pin again if he was really willing. After receiving Sik-pin's affirmative answer, the president asked her son-in-law what he thought. Jin-go understood that his mother-in-law wanted him to get over the pain of losing his wife, so he agreed. The chairman of the board announced that when Yoon-jae got pregnant, she would redistribute the property. Hui-xiang was thrilled. Her wish was finally coming true. The next morning, Hui-xiang found Yoon-jae and urged her to have the baby, but Yo-jae refused, saying she was too busy working. She told her mother-in-law that she was planning to have the baby 2 years later. Hui-xiang was furious. She didn't understand why her mother-in-law was angry. When Sik-pin came back in the evening, he said he had something to discuss with her, that they should have a child as soon as possible and give it to her uncle as an adopted son. On this day, Yong-hoon was greeting her classmates when she suddenly ran into the road. A car crashed into him. Sun-ya panicked and ran to check on his son's injuries. The driver of the car was none other than Jin-go. He rushed out of the car and picked up the boy and took him to the hospital. And it was this medical accident that made Sun-ya find true love. After treatment at the hospital, Yong-hoon was fine. After the doctors and nurses left, Jin-go apologized to Sun Ya. Then he took his cell phone out of his pocket and wanted to leave his number with Sun Ya. If there's any problem in the future, call him anytime. Sun Ya wanted to say no. After all, Yong-hoon ran into the road suddenly. She was also responsible for not taking care of him, but seeing that Jin-go was so sincere, she took the phone and left her number. Jin-go suddenly thought that Sun Ya looked familiar, so he asked Sun Ya if they had met somewhere before. Sun Ya was puzzled. When she heard Jin-go ask if her house had been rented out before, she recognized the person in front of her. It turns out that Jin-go had rented Sun Ya's house when he was a poor boy. Both of them didn't expect to meet again after 30 years. Then Jin-go sent Sun Ya and Yong-hoon home, but when they got out of the car, Yong-hoon accidentally left his video game in the car. When Yong-hoon woke up, he started crying for his game console. Sun Ya and her brother searched all over the house but couldn't find it. She realized that the game console might have been left in Jin-go's car, so she called Jin-go. Sure enough, it was in Jin-go's car. They arranged to meet at a nearby cafe tomorrow. The next day, Jin-go bought a lot of toys for Sun Ya to take back to Yong-hoon. Because Yong-hoon was hurt, he felt bad and wanted Sun Ya not to refuse. Sun Ya had to accept it with gratitude. Jin-go asked Sun Ya if he should apologize to the father. Sun Ya had no choice but to say that her husband passed away right after she gave birth to Yong-hoon. Jin-go was happy to hear that Sun Ya was single and told Sun Ya that he was also single. In the following days, Jin-go always wanted to meet Sun Ya. He not only accompanied Sun Ya to take Yong-hoon to the hospital to have his cast removed, he even took them out to a fancy restaurant together. Yong-hoon seemed to like Jin-go very much. He even drew a picture for Jin-go during the meeting. This made Jin-go very happy. Yong-hoon even said that it would be great if Jin-go was his father. Sun Ya immediately scolded Yong-hoon for not talking nonsense. After spending some time together, Jin-go thinks he likes Sun Ya, and Sun Ya felt sorry for bothering him all this time, but she couldn't afford to buy anything expensive for him, so the next day she prepared a lot of her own food and gave it to Jin-go. Jin-go didn't mind at all. She even took it home that night and tasted it with her family. Hui-xiang took a piece and put it in her mouth, but as she ate it, she realized something was wrong. It tasted like her friend Sun Ya's. That day, Sun Ya and Miso were both out of town, so she gave Yong-hoon to Miso's uncle, but he was in a hurry to go out on a date and left Yong-hoon asleep at home. When Yong-hoon woke up and saw no one at home, he was scared, so he called Jin-go crying and told him that there was no one at home. Jin-go immediately went to Sun Ya's house. When Yong-hoon saw him, he jumped into his arms. Jin-go gently calmed Yong-hoon down. He then noticed that Sun Ya's place was so shabby, which made him feel sad. Jin-go took Yong-hoon back to his home for a while so that he could take care of him. Hui-xiang saw this scene. She was so scared that she fell to the ground. Then she reacted and rushed to escape from the house. She couldn't understand why Yong-hoon came back with Jin-go. Is it because Sick-pin found out that she gave birth to Yong-hoon? In order to find out what's going on, when Jin-go left with Yong-hoon, she immediately followed him in her car. Sun Ya got a call from Jin-go after work. When she found out that Yong-hoon was at his place, he ran out to get Yong-hoon. Hui-xiang saw this scene. After Jin-go left, she immediately pretended to run into Sun Ya. She asked Sun Ya what her relationship with Jin-go was. Sun Ya realized that Jin-go is Hui Xiang's husband's elder brother, so he explained that they were just good friends who hadn't seen each other for many years. Hui-xiang was then relieved. That night, Jin-go brought back Sun Ya's food again. The chairman praised Sun Ya's cooking is really delicious. Jin-go looks proud of himself. Hui-xiang realized that Jin-go must like Sun Ya. She was worried that if Jin-go remarried, Sick-pin wouldn't have a chance to get the chairman's property, so she approached Sick-pin again and asked him to convince Yoon-jing to have a child immediately and adopt him as his uncle's son. On this day, Hui-xiang sneaked into the room to look for birth control pills while Yoon-jing was away. She suspected that her daughter-in-law hadn't gotten pregnant after a year of marriage because she was taking birth control pills. But Yoon-jing, who had just come out of the shower, saw her. Hui-xiang asked Yoon-jing if she was taking birth control pills. Yoon-jing was very uncomfortable and didn't want to answer. Hui-xiang had to urge Yoon-jing to have a baby, but Yoon-jing refuses, citing her career as the reason. Hui-xiang was angry. Yoon-jing thinks her mother-in-law is unreasonable, but there's more to it than that. When Sick-pin came back that night, he said he wanted them to have a child as soon as possible and pass it on to his uncle. Yoon-jing thought this was ridiculous. It was then that she realized her mother-in-law's real purpose in urging her to have a child. She immediately yelled at Sick-pin for being crazy. Then she told Sick-pin that she couldn't do it. At that moment, Hui-xiang came through the door and scolded Yoon-jing. She accused Yoon-jing of doing this for Sick-pin's future, but Yoon-jing just couldn't accept it. He turned around and rushed out of the house. But as soon as Yoon-jing stepped out, she ran into Sick-pin's father, Man Shio, who was coming back from work. She cried to her father-in-law in an aggravated manner. Man Shio was shocked, but before he could ask any questions, Hui-xiang came out after him. Man Shio calmed down Yoon-jing and told her to go home. When Yoon-jing went upstairs, Man Shio asked Hui-xiang what was going on. He found out that what Yoon-jing said was true. He immediately guessed that his wife must be coveting the chairman's property, so he immediately asked Hui-xiang why she did it, but Hui-xiang was already overwhelmed by desire and couldn't listen to anything. The next morning, Hui-xiang found Yoon-jing again and asked her how she was doing. Seeing that Yoon-jing still refused to agree, baby. Hui Xiang was completely enraged. She took the cosmetics and poured them all over Yun Jiang's head. Yun Jiang left the house in anger. Then she went to Sik Pin to make him angry for her. But Sik Pin not only didn't comfort her, he wanted to divorce her because of it. Yun Jiang was in disbelief. She never thought that Sik Pin would divorce her because of this. At that moment, she realized that Sik Pin didn't love her at all. Then Yun Jiang went to her aunt and told her what she was going through. She wanted to go back to her parents abroad, but she advised her not to be impulsive. Since Sik Pin was so determined, then she should just say yes. There's no need to make things so difficult for the couple. Yun Jiang thought it made sense. So when Hui Xiang called her and asked her to meet him at the cafe, she didn't refuse. When they met, Hui Xiang first apologized to Yun Jiang for what happened before. Then he told her that she gave birth to her uncle for the sake of their future. Yun Jiang was disgusted by what she said, but thinking that auntie told her that pregnancy is not that simple, she agreed to it. Hui Xiang was so happy, but she wasn't happy for long. That day, when she went to deliver food to the chairman, who was having a checkup at the hospital, she accidentally found out a shocking secret. The chairman's daughter had a son with another man before she married Jin Go. The chairman is now looking for this grandson everywhere. It turns out that the chairman's daughter, Wei Su, got pregnant and gave birth to someone else's child. The chairman was worried that she would be discriminated against in the future, so he secretly put his newborn grandson in front of the orphanage. When she heard the baby's cries, the chairman's heart flashed with sadness, but for the sake of her daughter, she left the orphanage. Little did she know that this decision would be regretted for the rest of her life. 21 years have passed. Wei Su still hasn't forgotten the baby. After 10 years of marriage to Jin Go, she couldn't conceive another child. This made Wei Su feel sorry for her husband. Unable to bear his daughter's suffering, the chairman called the orphanage to find out the whereabouts of his grandson, but Wei Su overheard him. With a look of disbelief, Wei Su asked her mother what she had just said. Didn't she say that her child had died shortly after birth? The chairman had to tell Wei Su everything. Wei Su was instantly devastated. She immediately went to the orphanage, but the director told her that there was no such child in the orphanage's records. But she heard from the deceased former director that the child got sick when he arrived at the orphanage. He was adopted at the hospital. The woman who brought the child to the hospital was just a volunteer at the orphanage. She didn't leave any contact information, so they don't know where the child is now. The hope that had just risen was dashed, leaving Wei Su in despair. Wei Su cried uncontrollably on the way back. All these years she thought her child was dead. The longing for him made her miserable every day. Finally, she had a car accident on the way back. By the time Jin Go and the chairman arrived at the hospital, Wei Su had died from her injuries. The chairman was devastated. For the rest of her life, she looked at her daughter's picture every day and wept. She vowed to find her grandson. Unbeknownst to her, her grandson was Xiaolong, who tutored Sik Pin's sister. That day, the chairman came back from a trip and saw Xiaolong waiting outside. As soon as she saw Xiaolong, she felt a strange affinity with him, so she warmly greeted Xiaolong and asked him to wait inside. She even asked the nanny to bring Xiaolong a walnut snack, but Xiaolong was embarrassed and apologized to the chairman that he was allergic to walnuts and couldn't eat them. The chairwoman immediately remembered that her deceased daughter was also allergic to walnuts, but she thought it was just a coincidence and didn't care. 7 years passed quickly. The president never gave up looking for her grandson. The subordinate she sent to look for her grandson called her and told her that an old man claimed to have seen Auntie Kong. The chairman was so excited that she asked her subordinate for the address. She wanted to meet the old man in person, but Hui Xiang overheard her conversation. When she heard the news, Hui Xiang felt an unprecedented panic. All these years, all she did was hoping that Sik Pin would inherit the chairman's fortune. If the chairman found his grandson, all her efforts would be in vain. She won't let that happen. When the chairman left for the cafe, Hui Xiang immediately followed in his car. Half an hour later, the chairman met the old man who saw Auntie Kong. She took out an envelope full of money and handed it to the old man. She begged the old man to help her find her grandson, no matter what. The old man immediately agreed. He then told the chairman that he saw Auntie Kong wearing slippers, so she must be living nearby. The chairman was overjoyed, but Hui Xiang, who was eavesdropping, was in a state of shock. In order to prevent the chairman from finding her grandson, she even wanted to kill the old man, thinking that as long as the old man disappeared from this world, the chairman will never find his grandson. But the traffic light turned red just as she ran into the old man. She almost got into a car accident. In the end, Hui Xiang could only watch the old man leave. Hui Xiang came home and sat on the floor in despair, not knowing what to do. She had forgotten all about the good things the chairman had done for the family. At that moment, she only hoped that Yun Jiang would have a child as soon as possible to get the chairman's property. That's why the next day, Hui Xiang started to cook tonic for Yun Jiang in the hope that she would have a baby soon. She didn't know that Yun Jiang didn't drink a single sip and poured it all away. Sik Pin was also devoted to Miso. He stays at Miso's door just to see her one more time. But that day, Sik Pin saw Miso and Xiaolong walking together. The next day, Yun Jiang drove out and met a man who blackmailed her. Yun Jiang thought she really hit him. He demanded a high amount of money from her. Yun Jiang panicked instantly. Just when she didn't know what to do, Miso suddenly appeared and helped her out. Yun Jiang is very grateful for Miso's help, although neither of them knew each other's identity yet. But Yun Jiang suddenly remembers that Miso is the one who knocked off her wedding ring in the parking lot a few days ago. Meeting again made Yun Jiang feel that she and Miso were destined to meet again, so she bought Miso some snacks to thank her and invited her to dinner. The two soon became good friends who could talk about anything. When she found out that Miso was working at a magazine to gain experience for her journalist exam. Yu Zheng immediately told Miso that she was working at a TV station. If Miso passes the exam, they'll be colleagues. She also told Miso to call her if she had any questions. Miso quickly thanked Yun Zheng, but then Yun Zhang's cell phone suddenly rang. Hearing that Sick Pin was in the neighborhood, Yun Zheng gave him the restaurant's address. She told Miso that her husband was coming to introduce them, but Miso was in a hurry to go back to study for his exams, so he declined in embarrassment. Yun Zheng was a bit sorry to hear that, but she told Miso to go home first. But just as Miso was about to leave, Sick Pin arrived at the restaurant. They passed each other by. Miso went home and started to study as fast as she could. Miso was so tired that she suddenly started to get a nosebleed, but she seems to have seen it before and calmly took a piece of paper from the side to wipe it off. At that moment, Xiaolong came to bring her food and saw this scene. Xiaolong's expression immediately became tense. Although Miso said that she always does this, it's fine, but Xiaolong went to buy a box of the most expensive tonic and told her to take care of her health and not to work so hard. Then he turned around and left. When Miso saw how expensive the tonic was, immediately chased after her and wanted to return it to Xiaolong, but Xiaolong refused to take it back. Seeing this, Miso couldn't help but ask Xiaolong why he was so nice to her. Xiaolong finally expressed his feelings to Miso. Miso was stunned by the sudden confession, but she hasn't gotten over the hurt Sick Pin caused her, so she doesn't have the courage to love someone truly. Besides, she's pregnant and has a 7-year-old son. Miso could only reject Xiaolong on the grounds that she had to sit for her exams soon and didn't have time to fall in love. Xiaolong was very sad. He went to a restaurant for a drink and ran into Miso's uncle. He recognized Xiaolong right away because they had met before. Xiaolong didn't expect to meet Miso's uncle here and invited him to sit down. Miso's uncle seemed to like Xiaolong. Seeing that Xiaolong was drunk, he took him back to his home. The next morning, Miso was shocked to see Xiaolong at her house. Xiaolong was embarrassed. His uncle didn't know what happened between them and even warmly invited Xiaolong to have breakfast at his home. But when Xiaolong left, he left his cell phone at Miso's house. Miso had no choice but to call Xiaolong's office and tell him that he was in front of the office and ask him to come out to get his cell phone. Xiaolong was very happy to see Miso again. He ran to find Miso, but he tripped and hugged Miso. This scene was seen by Sick Pin, who was passing by. This made him feel jealous, so when Miso came out, he immediately rushed forward and asked Miso what his relationship with Xiaolong was. Miso said relentlessly that it had nothing to do with him and left the place. That night, Sick Pin came to Miso's doorstep in frustration. Unbeknownst to him, Xiaolong bought barbecue meat to Miso's house in order to spend more time with Miso. After dinner, Miso kindly sends Xiaolong away. Sick Pin is completely enraged by them. After Xiaolong left, he immediately went to stop Miso. He asked Miso once again what his relationship with Xiaolong was. Miso didn't want to talk to him and turned around to go home, but Sick Pin grabbed him by the arm. Xiaolong immediately pushed Sick Pin away. Then he asked Miso if she was alright, but Sick Pin punched Xiaolong with his hand. Then he grabbed Xiaolong by the collar and shouted that Xiaolong had no right to care about Miso. Miso rushed forward to stop him. After scolding Sick Pin, Miso took Xiaolong and left the place. Sick Pin looks at the back of the two men and can only yell with anger and resentment. That day, Sick Pin suddenly realized that his wife was chatting with Miso. He was so scared that he ran and hid. He waited for Miso to leave before he peeked out to observe. But then he saw Xiaolong next to Miso, watching the two of them playing and joking around. Sick Pin was jealous. When he got home, he took out his anger on his mother. He said that if she hadn't told Miso that she was married and had a family, Miso wouldn't have been so determined to break up with him. Hui Xiang immediately guessed that her son wanted to get back with Miso. He immediately reminded him that he has a wife, but Sick Pin couldn't listen to anything. The thought of Miso being with another man hurt him so much that he couldn't breathe. So in the days that followed, Sick Pin often stayed out late and went to bars to get drunk in order not to think about Miso. And Yun Zheng, who felt left out by her husband, at first comforted herself that Sick Pin was too busy with work. But when Sick Pin stayed out at night again, she couldn't stand it anymore. She immediately packed her bags and prepared to move to her aunt's house. Hui Xiang panicked when she saw her daughter-in-law leaving home, but no matter how much she tried to stop Yun Zheng, she left the house. Just when she didn't know what to do, the nanny suddenly came out and told her that the chairman had fainted. Hui Xiang was shocked. Luckily, Zhen Go hadn't gone to work yet. He rushed to take his mother-in-law to the hospital, but the doctor told Zhen Go that the chairman's test results were not good. Initial suspicion is that it may be cancer. Zhen Go was shocked, but Hui Xiang, who was waiting at home, was overjoyed at the news, because she hoped that the chairman would die before she found her grandson. That way, the chairman's fortune would still be Sick Pin's. But when she thought that her son was now depressed over a woman, she was furious. Unbeknownst to her, Sick Pin went to see Miso again. He angrily questioned Miso about her divorce. He said he would come back to her to make it up to her after everything was settled. Why is she still with Xiaolong? Miso felt disgusted, but before she could say anything, Her cell phone rang. Hui Xiang bluntly asked Miso if she was seeing Sick Pin again. Miso was so annoyed by this mother and son that he immediately handed his cell phone to Sick Pin and asked him to explain to Hui Xiang. His mother's words made Sick Pin realize something was wrong, so he rushed back to the car and used his cell phone to call his mother again, but the call was never answered. Sick Pin panicked and went home to look for his mother, but he found out from his father that Hui Xiang had disappeared. After hearing this, Sick Pin's uneasiness grew stronger and stronger, so he went outside with his father and sister to look for her. Finally, Sick Pin found a drunken Hui Xiang on a mountain. He had never seen his mother in such a state. He thought she was like this because he was meeting Miso. Sick Pin had no choice but to tell his mother that he was capable of making his own decisions, so he hoped that his mother would not interfere in his relationship anymore. But Hui Xiang agreed. She said she didn't want to see him suffer so much. Hui Xiang then told Mr. Sick Pin that he has a grandson who is a stranger, and that the chairman is desperately searching for this grandson. Hearing this, Sick Pin was shocked and at the same time finally realized that his mother had done everything for him. In order not to let his mother's 20 years of hard work go to waste, he decided to put down Miso and vowed to grab the chairman's fortune. So Sick Pin waited for his father to pick up his mother and drove to his wife's aunt's house. Because he wants to make the chairman's company a shell before he finds his own grandson, he had to use the power of his rich father-in-law. So when he met Yunzheng, he apologized to him sincerely. Then he took Yunzheng into his arms and pretended to be affectionate and told Yunzheng that he couldn't live without her. He promised that he would never leave her alone again. Yunzheng instantly lost her temper. She loved Sick Pin so much that she didn't realize she was just a tool. The next day, Sick Pin went to work full-time. He was determined to take control of the company in his own hands, and Hui Xiang saw that her son had regained his vigor, so she went to a loan shark and borrowed a large sum of money to silence the old man who knew Auntie Kong. Auntie Kong was the last person to see the chairman's grandson. She hoped the old man wouldn't help the chairman find Auntie Kong. She didn't realize that when she gave the money to the old man agreed on the surface. But 2 days later, the old man called to ask the chairman for a meeting. Hui Xiang was afraid that the old man would tell the chairman about her bribe, so the next morning she set out for the place where the chairman and the old man had agreed to meet. She found out that the old man was after the chairman's money. He didn't know where Auntie Kong was. Xiang Hui recorded it all on her cell phone. Then she threatened the old man to do what she told him to do, otherwise, she would tell the chairman. The old man had no choice but to agree. So when the chairman met with the old man followed Hui Xiang's order and found someone he knew to impersonate Auntie Kong. He told the chairman that her grandson had died more than 20 years ago. That day, Miso realized that Xialong, who was courting her, was on a blind date with another woman. Seeing the two of them talking and laughing, Miso's heart was filled with jealousy. Xialong also found her. The disappointment in Miso's eyes made Xialong panic, so he rushed out to explain to Miso that it was all his mother's arrangement. He didn't know anything about it. Miso's anger subsided, but she still urged Xialong to hurry back. Then he was ready to leave, but Xialong kissed her directly. Miso subconsciously pushed Xialong away. Xialong summoned up the courage to propose to Miso. He truly loves this innocent girl in front of him. The sudden confession made Miso's breath catch in her throat, but in the end, she refused Xialong with tears in her eyes. She told Xialong she couldn't marry him. Xialong couldn't figure it out. Miso obviously likes him. Why did she keep rejecting him over and over again? After Xialong's questioning, Miso had no choice but to confess to him that she had a child. Xialong didn't realize that Miso was pregnant out of wedlock, so when Miso left the house in tears, he didn't go after Miso. But before Xialong could recover, on his way home, he was suddenly stopped and beaten up by some men. They were sent by Sick Pin. It turns out that Sick Pin has been sending people to follow them secretly. The footage of Xialong kissing Miso was filmed by his subordinates and sent to Sick Pin. Sick Pin was shocked by this scene. He won't allow another man to take Miso away from him. After his men finished teaching Xialong a lesson, Sick Pin slowly walked to Xialong's side. Then he warned him to stay away from Miso. At that moment, Xialong finally realized Yonghun's father is Sick Pin. The next day, Xialong spent the day at home, though he already had the answer in his mind, but he still wanted to hear the truth from Miso himself. So he went to find Miso again. He dragged Miso to a deserted place and asked him what he knew in his heart. Miso admitted that Yonghun was her high school baby. Sick Pin is also the father. Xialong is now forced to believe this cruel truth. He broke down and vented his pain. Then Xialong told Miso that he really loved her, but he couldn't accept that she had loved another man, and he couldn't accept that she had given birth to another man. At this moment, Xialong seems to regard Miso as a woman who doesn't love herself. The tone of his voice reveals a strong sense of disgust and dislike. Miso only felt like her heart was cut to pieces and could not say a word except to cry. She knew there was no way she could ever be with Xialong again. Soon Sick Pin received the news that Miso and Xialong's relationship had broken down, but he didn't feel happy at all. The next day when Miso went to work, suddenly someone brought her flowers and a diamond necklace. She subconsciously thought they were from Xialong, but when she excitedly opened the card, she realized that they were all from Sick Pin. The smile on Miso's face froze. She asked asked Sik Pin to a cafe. She returned the flowers and the diamond necklace. She said she didn't want anything to do with him, and warned Sik Pin not to bother her again. But Sik Pin still refused to give up. He was still talking about his love for her. Miso didn't want to talk to him anymore and just turned around and left the place. But as soon as she left the house, she ran into Yoon Jang. Sik Pin chased her out and saw this scene. He didn't expect to see his wife so coincidentally. He was so scared that he hid the necklace. But Yoon Jang didn't know about Miso and Sik Pin's relationship. He even warmly introduced them to each other. Sik Pin pretended to greet Miso as if he didn't know her. Miso didn't realize that Yoon Jang was Sik Pin's wife. She nodded her head in a panic. Yoon Jang didn't notice the unnatural look on their faces. She happily invited Miso to have lunch with her. But Miso was afraid that if she stayed here, she'd be exposed. So she hurriedly left with the excuse that she hadn't finished her work. Looking at Miso's back, Yoon Jang praised Miso to Sik Pin as a very nice girl. When Miso went back to the office, she had a shocked look on her face. If Yoon Jang found out that she dated Sik Pin and that she gave birth to Sik Pin's child, the consequences would be disastrous. So until the end of the night, Miso's heart was still on edge. But then she ran into Shalong. Shalong was obviously drunk. Miso wanted to go over there, but she knew she couldn't face Shalong again. She could only follow him silently, but she didn't realize that Shalong went to her house. Miso's heart broke, but things soon took a turn for the worse. The next night, Miso had just finished having dinner with her co-workers. She met Shalong again, drinking alone. Miso's boss was Shalong's senior in college, so the two of them were very close. He then invited Miso to sit next to Shalong. Then the boss left with his colleague. Shalong thought he had nothing to say to Miso, so he left the place, but he accidentally left his backpack behind. Miso found it and rushed to catch up with the backpack, but he saw a car speeding towards Shalong. Miso risked his life to save Shalong. Shalong's heart was deeply touched. He quickly and painfully helped Miso up. He couldn't help but scold her for ignoring the danger, but the first thing Miso said was to ask Shalong if he was hurt. Shalong was very touched. He loved Miso but couldn't accept that Miso was pregnant with someone else. This put him in a deep struggle. He hugged Miso and painfully asked her what he should do. Miso was in the same pain as Shalong. After all, it took her a long time to fall in love again, but Miso knew that the existence of a child was a gap between them, so he told Shalong to be safe, and left the place with his grief. Then Shalong walked home in a state of confusion. He ran into his father, who was returning from a trip. The father seemed to realize that his son was trapped in love, so when the two of them sat down in the pavilion downstairs, he told Shalong that true love is not just about appreciating each other's strengths, it's also about being tolerant of each other's shortcomings. Don't give up on the person you really like just because of other people's opinions or doubts. Only in this way you will not have regrets. His father's words instantly awakened Shalong. He did not go home with his father. He went to the river alone. He took his cell phone out of his pocket and looked at Miso's picture. At this moment Shalong finally realized that even though Miso had given birth, he was still deeply in love with her, so he decided to accept Miso's past. So the next morning Shalong went to find Miso. He told her that he still wanted to be with her. By now, Miso was already crying uncontrollably. She immediately nodded her head and admitted that she loved Shalong too. Shalong immediately went to Miso and embraced her in his arms. The two of them were officially in love. After sending Miso back to the newspaper office, Shalong was about to leave when something occurred to him. He took out the ring from his pocket, but Miso was still worried that Shalong wouldn't be able to accept her child, so she hesitated when Shalong was about to put on the ring. Shalong saw Miso's concern right away, so he told Miso that he loved her and everything about her. Miso's heart was touched. She accepted Shalong's ring right away, but there was someone who didn't want them to be happy. At that moment, Sik Pin looked at the diamond necklace in his hand, which Miso refused to accept, and was very upset. At that moment, he suddenly received a text message from Shalong asking him to meet him on the rooftop. When Sik Pin arrived at the rooftop, Shalong bluntly told Sik Pin that Miso had accepted the ring from him. Then he warned Sik Pin not to meet Miso again, otherwise, he will never let him go. Sik Pin was furious. Unbeknownst to him, his wife Yoon Jang had already arrived at his office. She saw the necklace that he hadn't put away yet. Yoon Jang didn't know it was something Miso didn't want. She thought it was a gift from Sik Pin, so when she saw Sik Pin come back, she immediately asked him to put it on her. Sik Pin didn't dare to tell the truth, so he put it on Yoon Jang, but he didn't expect Yoon Jang to show it off to Miso. Miso looked at the necklace around Yoon Jang's neck, but he didn't have the courage to tell Yoon Jang the truth. At that moment, Sik Pin arrived. The atmosphere became awkward. When Sik Pin sat down, he looked at Miso's hand. He saw a ring on her ring finger. This made him feel angry. Miso felt like she was on pins and needles, so she claimed she had something to do and left. That night, Sik Pin went to the bar again. He drank and looked at Miso's picture with pain. He was so upset that he got drunk before going home. Yoon Jang saw Sik Pin's cell phone fall out of his jacket. Curious, he opened it, but he saw Miso's picture in the photo album. Yoon Jang was confused. She couldn't understand why there was a picture of Miso on her husband's cell phone, and it was taken before she introduced them. Then why did they pretend they didn't know each other at that time? She didn't know that Miso was not only Sik Pin's first love. She also gave birth to Sik Pin's son 7 years ago. The next morning, Yoon Jang asked Miso to meet her at a restaurant. She wanted to find out what her relationship with Sik Pin was. At first, Miso thought it was just the two of them having dinner, but she didn't realize that Yoon Jang had called Sik Pin too. When Miso saw Sik Pin, her eyes subconsciously started to hide, and Sik Pin was obviously shocked. But when he saw his wife looking at him, he pretended that he didn't know Miso well. Miso was very uncomfortable, so he lied that she had something to do and got up to leave. But Yoon Jang didn't let her go this time. After Miso sat down again, Yoon Jang asked them if they had anything to say to her. Sik Pin got nervous. He reached out to grab the cell phone back, but Yoon Jang had already found Miso's picture in Sik Pin's cell phone. Then he asked what their relationship was. Miso doesn't know how Sik Pin got her picture. Facing Yoon Jin's questioning, she can only explain in a panic that it's all a misunderstanding. However, Yoon Jang doesn't listen and thinks that her husband and Miso betrayed her. She threw a glass of water on Miso's face. Sik Pin was furious when she saw her beloved being harassed. At that moment, Yoon Jang lost her cool. She left the place in a rage after giving her harsh words. Sik Pin hurriedly chased after her. Miso reacted and chased after him, but Yoon Jang has already driven away. Miso scolded Sik Pin for having her picture on his cell phone. Then she ordered Sik Pin to delete the photo right now. She doesn't want to be involved with him anymore. On the way back, Miso kept calling Yoon Jang's number to explain to her, but Yoon Jang threw the phone away as soon as he saw it was her. Thinking back to the previous scene, when she foolishly introduced them to each other, Yoon Jang thought she was a joke. Then she went home and packed her bags to move in with her aunt. Sik Pin grabbed her and kept apologizing. His sincere look shook Yoon Jang's heart. However, Sik Pin's next statement that it was all his fault and had nothing to do with Miso completely enraged Yoon Jang. She never thought that Sik Pin would defend Miso at a time like this. At this moment, Yoon Jang's hatred for Sik Pin and Miso reached its peak. She vowed to take revenge on them, and soon she found her chance. The next day, Miso came to the TV station where Yoon Jang worked to take the reporter's exam. When she saw Yoon Jang, she immediately ran up to him and hoped that Yoon Jang would talk to her. But Yoon Jang didn't care. She just took one look at Miso's test card and left coldly. While Miso was waiting for the exam, she suddenly received an encouraging message from Shalong. Miso was immediately amused. Her nervousness was relieved. At the same time, Yoon Jang sneaked into the preparation room to get back at Miso. When no one was around, she found Miso's copy of the test from among the many questions. Then she replaced Miso's test with a blank sheet of paper. Half an hour later, the test began. Yoon Jang sat there proudly waiting to see Miso make a fool of herself. When Miso took out the test and saw the blank paper, she panicked, but she soon calmed down. She memorized the article she practiced before. The interviewer was puzzled and asked her why she didn't answer the questions they gave her. Miso quickly told the interviewer that she had been given a blank sheet of paper. She thought it was a test of her ability to react on the spot. The interviewers were very pleased with Miso's excellent performance. Except Yoon Jang. After all, she changed the questions to white paper to get back at Miso. But now she helped Miso by mistake. She was furious. After the interview, Miso approached Yoon Jang again to explain the misunderstanding. But Yo Jang didn't believe her. She asked Miso why she lied to her if they didn't have any relationship. Miso was speechless. The conversation broke up. Miso was very sad. She knew that she and Yoon Jang would never be friends again. When Yoon Jang returned to her aunt's house in the evening, she immediately told her aunt about her decision to divorce Sik Pin. But auntie told her to calm down. There's no good in divorcing Sik Pin now. The right thing to do is to go back and have a child to keep the family fortune in her own hands. These words instantly woke up Yoon Jang. So when Sik Pin came to pick her up with flowers and gifts, she went home with Sik Pin without saying a word. Sik Pin thought Yoon Jang had come to her senses and forgiven him. Unbeknownst to him, Yoon Jang had a very bad idea in mind to get back at him.